the perfect Taylor Swift song to use for that moment in the film.
I mean, I actually have to give credit to Sony, who cut this trailer. They picked that song of all the songs. Like, you know, we knew we wanted one of her songs, but that was the song that they picked. And you know, we worked like hand in hand on that trailer. And when it was done and we saw the final product, like before we released it, we were like, this is so special. And it resonated with so many people. And at that point, her music wasn't in the movie yet.
The way Taylor Swift and Blake Lively acted around the film It Ends With Us raises serious questions about maturity and role models. Their behavior shows patterns that make people wonder if these are truly the kinds of public figures young audiences should admire. Looking closely at the facts, a picture starts to form that is less polished than the image often presented. Taylor Swift built her public identity as a sweet, relatable, and harmless girl next door. Throughout her career, she has repeatedly positioned herself as the injured party in conflicts. When Kanye West interrupted her on stage, she was framed as wronged. Later, she claimed harm from Kanye and Kim Kardashian over song lyrics, even though recordings later showed she agreed to the reference. Each situation added to a storyline where Taylor was always the one being hurt, never the one with power. That same pattern continued with Scooter Braun. When he bought Big Machine Records, Taylor portrayed herself as stripped of control and mistreated. What often gets left out is that Big Machine held many major artists, not just her. Those musicians did not publicly complain about ownership of recordings. Another ignored detail is that Taylor's father invested in the label early on, which helped her secure her first deal. When the company sold, he reportedly earned millions. Yet this part of the story rarely gets mentioned, while Scooter is cast as the villain. Taylor later re-recorded her albums, an unusual move in the industry. Many artists do not own original recordings, and most accept that reality. Even legends like Paul McCartney did not redo entire catalogs. Taylor turned this choice into a moral battle, launching a public campaign that painted Scooter as controlling and dangerous. She was even offered a chance to buy her recordings back under standard confidentiality terms, but refused. The public narrative stayed focused on betrayal, not business. Scooter's presence also matters in the film situation. Testimony shows tension between publicists tied to him and others working behind the scenes. Professional rivalries, grudges, and shifting alliances played a large role. Stephanie Jones admitted dislike for another publicist due to past client issues connected to Scooter. At first, she praised certain media coverage. Later, when business relationships changed, that same coverage suddenly became a problem. As things escalated, Stephanie reached out through mutual social connections. A friend linked to Taylor and Blake became involved. Private information from a former employee's phone was shared, even though legal rules strictly restrict using someone's personal data that way. Despite those limits, the information was passed along, deepening the mess. At that stage, emotions seemed to outweigh judgment. Taylor's involvement did not stop there. Sony selected one of her songs for the trailer, a track tied to her past resentment over the label sale. Blake worried Taylor might reject the choice because of its meaning. This alone shows how deeply personal history influenced professional decisions. Taylor had already been advising Blake, praising her talent and supporting claims that were later disputed. Messages between Blake and Taylor reveal excitement, flattery, and shared resentment. Blake described Taylor as heroic and praised her loyalty. She also expressed extreme anger toward Justin, not over serious wrongdoing, but over perceived disrespect and credit. The tone suggests ego, competition, and validation mattered more than fairness. Taken together, this behavior reflects calculated alliances, blurred boundaries, and emotional reactions from powerful adults. Instead of modeling accountability or restraint, it shows manipulation, grudges, and image control. For people watching from the outside, especially younger fans, it is fair to ask whether admiration should come with more critical thinking. Do you really think he would ever feel safe saying something like that to someone truly respected in the industry? Nobody would walk up to Steven Spielberg and say they do not know his work just because they claim to be out of touch with pop culture. That kind of comment would never happen. The anger here comes from the idea that pretending to not know someone important is somehow clever or impressive. Acting uninterested is being used as a shield, as if that makes a person seem cooler or more powerful. In reality, confidence comes from curiosity, admiration, and openly respecting people who succeed. That kind of honesty shows security, not weakness. The frustration did not stop there. Another issue that caused outrage was the NYU situation, which was treated like a personal victory worth celebrating. The praise became excessive, almost worshipful, turning admiration into something intense and emotional. The tone shifted from support into obsession, framed as loyalty and protection. The anger felt stronger when someone else was involved, especially when it came to defending a close friend. Any perceived insult became unforgivable. This reaction shows how personal pride and identity were tied to status and recognition. At the center of all this was the belief that Justin did not know who Taylor Swift was. That single idea sparked deep offense. The underlying message was clear. Everyone should know who they are. Fame demanded acknowledgement. Not recognizing them was treated as disrespect. This mindset created an invisible social hierarchy where only certain people belonged. If someone failed to recognize their importance, they were labeled stupid, ignorant, or irrelevant. From that moment, hostility took over. Things escalated further once Taylor's music became involved. Sony chose a song with heavy emotional meaning tied to Taylor's past. Blake worried approval might be difficult due to that history. Even so, she pushed forward, admitting she wanted control over the final result. She asked for feedback, praised Taylor's cultural influence, and framed the choice as necessary for success. The message was subtle but clear. The song could be used as leverage. Power over the trailer meant power over the project. When Taylor responded, her enthusiasm reinforced that dynamic. She celebrated the use of her music and mocked Justin at the same time. Her messages encouraged Blake to use the song strategically. The idea was simple: music equals influence. If the song stayed, Blake gained leverage. If it left, pressure could be applied. What should have been a creative choice became a tool in a personal conflict. This mindset revealed something deeper. Hatred was not based on actions or facts, but on loyalty and group identity. Disliking someone because a friend disliked them became acceptable. No effort was made to understand the full picture. Instead, exclusion felt empowering. Being part of the popular group mattered more than fairness or truth. This behavior mirrors classic mean girl dynamics, where power comes from unity against a shared enemy. Feminism was used as a label but not understood. Business decisions were framed as oppression. Professional boundaries were called misogyny. Buying a company or directing a film became proof of hatred toward women. These claims ignored reality and replaced it with emotion-driven narratives. Success achieved through family connections and privilege was never questioned, yet authority from others was treated as an attack. Later, when the trailer finally released with Taylor's song included, it became clear there was never real opposition. The music stayed, control shifted. Taylor left on tour, communications slowed, and Blake moved deeper into editing. Months later, legal actions appeared suddenly, quietly, and strategically. A covert lawsuit surfaced with no clear defendants, no specific claims, and extremely invasive demands. It sought unlimited access to private data, far beyond normal legal limits. The structure of that subpoena raised alarms. It had no deadlines, no boundaries, and no proper targets. It demanded continuous cooperation as if surveillance was expected. This confirmed fears that private information was being monitored. The entire situation showed manipulation disguised as justice. What started as ego and resentment evolved into legal overreach. Instead of confidence and leadership, the behavior reflected insecurity, control, and misuse of power. What feels most disturbing here is how the phone issue was handled. The device belonged to an employee, yet there was no mention of informing that worker or protecting their rights. There was also no clear notice to the client. The wording of the request carefully avoided that problem by saying only certain material was being demanded. It claimed no files were needed about other clients, only items connected to Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, and Wayfarer Studios. It also stated that unrelated private details about staff, such as finances or employment matters, were not required. On the surface, this sounds careful, but in reality, it shows something else. By narrowing the request so precisely, it becomes obvious that the people behind this action already knew exactly who they wanted information about. They clearly had targets in mind, but chose not to name them directly. That choice matters. The request demanded records going back to December 1st, 2022, long before any public conflict existed. This means they were searching for anything useful, not just material tied to a specific event. That alone raises serious concerns about intent. The request also asked for all communications involving Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, their families, and their companies. It demanded anything connected to alleged misconduct, retaliation, or negative publicity related to the film It Ends With Us. The wording stayed vague while pointing in one direction. It even included Ryan Reynolds, even though he could not be part of any legal harassment claim tied to Justin Baldoni. Ryan was not named in the lawsuit and had no role as a complainant. Including him makes no legal sense and suggests overreach. What makes this even stranger is what happened next. Once the requested material was obtained, the case was quickly shut down. Testimony showed that Blake herself asked for the case to be opened, then requested its closure just days before information appeared in the New York Times. She already knew about the phone data months earlier. That means the contents were accessed before any legal order existed. Sharing or using that data outside proper legal channels breaks confidentiality rules. Even more troubling, the company that filed the action had no direct communication with the person whose data was taken or with her lawyers. This shows the move was never about fairness or process. It was about gathering material quietly. Taylor Swift was aware of this effort and helped connect people involved. That raises questions about whether similar tactics were used before against others she disliked. Text messages later show Blake admitting she knew she was not supposed to read the information. She even said she understood it was irrational to believe all digital material could be public. Still, she kept reading. Shortly after, messages suggested anticipation that damaging stories were about to surface. There was discussion about timing, headlines, and how to respond. Taylor's messages show strong emotion and certainty. She talked about defeating people using their own words and described the situation as a hidden horror story that would soon be exposed. She believed this would protect other women. At the same time, she celebrated how quickly public opinion flipped once the article was released. She openly acknowledged knowing about the phone and the plan to share its contents. When everything is viewed together, motivation becomes clearer. Taylor believed the media piece would hurt a company she thought was targeting her online. That belief appears to be wrong. Evidence suggests someone else was responsible. Still, resentment toward Scooter Braun played a huge role. Taylor knew Blake's anger came from losing control of the film, not from abuse. Even so, they encouraged each other with claims of disrespect and framed business disagreements as moral crimes.
Now the consequences are real. The lawsuit over the phone data remains active. Evidence shows coordination, deleted records, and possible destruction of material. Taylor has stayed silent because public support would expose her role and make her look vindictive. By staying quiet, her image stays clean while Blake absorbs the fallout. When the story shifted and lies were exposed, Taylor distanced herself immediately. At some point, criticism has to land. This is not how real conflicts are resolved, and accountability should not be optional just because someone is powerful. The most disturbing part of this situation is realizing who was actually running things behind the scenes. These were the people guiding a hidden digital effort. They were the ones gathering private material, watching communications, and quietly collecting information. Everything was done in such a secretive way that it eventually appeared in a major newspaper. That did not happen by accident. They knew the article was coming. They also knew they should not have possessed that information. They understood it was wrong, yet they moved forward anyway. When Taylor said, "You win," on the 21st, it revealed the real purpose of the whole plan. There was never a genuine intention to pursue a lawsuit. The legal filing existed only to support a media story. The goal was exposure, not justice. They expected the story to land, cause damage, and then fade away. They did not expect resistance. They believed the other side would stay silent, feel pressured, or back down. That assumption turned out to be a serious mistake. Instead, they mocked him. They laughed, called him foolish, and suggested he lacked intelligence or strategy. They claimed he did not understand how power games worked. What they failed to see was that the studio leadership and their partners had been preparing for this moment for a long time. For nearly a year, they had been documenting actions, preserving records, and building a response. While Taylor and Ryan avoided responsibility, others were carefully putting pieces in place. Now everything is public. Taylor can no longer pretend she had no awareness. She cannot hide behind the image of being uninvolved or misled. Even if Blake gave her false details at certain points, that does not change the core issue. Taylor knew why Blake was angry. It was never about fear or safety. It was about control. Blake wanted authority over the project, and Taylor understood that. That is why she offered advice on how to gain leverage, rather than urging her to leave. That detail matters. If Taylor truly believed her friend had been harmed in a serious way, the response would have been very different. A genuine ally would have said to walk away immediately and report the behavior to authorities. Encouraging someone to stay, fight for creative power, and manipulate outcomes does not align with believing a crime occurred. That contradiction exposes the truth of what this was really about. Seeing this unfold is unsettling. It shows how easily narratives can be shaped when fame, influence, and connections are involved. It also shows how confidence can turn into arrogance. They assumed protection would last forever. They believed public sympathy would always follow. That belief is now being tested. There are still open questions. It is unclear when or if the studio will fully act on what they have learned regarding the Van Zandt matter. They may still have legal options available. Statements have already hinted at possible action. If that happens, it may not stop with one person. Separate claims could exist against multiple individuals for different reasons. What is clear is that this situation is far from over. Exposure has changed the balance. Silence is no longer safety. Distance no longer equals innocence. The story that was meant to end quietly has instead opened a much larger conversation. Power, influence, and accountability are now front and center. I'm curious how others see this. Do you think consequences are coming, or will this fade away? Share your thoughts below, support the video if you found it helpful, follow the channel for updates, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next.